Hello and welcome to Hidden Magic Tarot. I am Nancy. This video is part of my deck collection for 2026 series. I'm sharing my entire collection of decks, so tarot, oracle, playing cards, and Lenormand. This video will have all of my vintage tarot decks. I do not have any vintage of other types of decks, so these are all vintage tarot, and there will not be links down below because these are all older decks, and so I cannot provide a link to get an older version of these decks, though one of these decks is still in print. Let's get started. The first deck I want to show you is the Tarot Maddonni. My understanding is that this deck went through one printing in 1981 and it has not been printed ever since. This was a French deck and it is tremendous. I saw this art and I had to have it. This was the first vintage deck I bought, and I bought it in 2026. And now I am newly obsessed with vintage decks. As you can see, the pips are really, let me separate some of those out. The pips are really different than what we're used to seeing. The majors and the quartz are all scenic, but the pips, let me just pull these out. As you can see, it's just got the one large suit symbol in the center and then the numbers on the side to let you know. So it's not like there are 7 cups, but isn't this wonderful? And these are all like little lines and like dots, I think. I think the shape of this deck is also really interesting. It's got kind of longer and skinnier shape to it. But I don't know if you can see with this art, it's like tiny little lines making up the beard. But it's really, really fun to look at. Let me get you a couple more of the majors. So it is nice that it's bilingual. It's got the French and the English. I don't speak French, so that's really helpful to me, though I do speak Spanish, so I think that I would be able to guess what they mean anyway. And by how they look, there's not a huge departure with, you know, the majors and how they look. I think it's pretty clear what you're looking at. And then obviously with the pips, I think you wouldn't have too much trouble with those either. I just think the art is tremendous. Okay, let me show you a couple more. And then as you can see, let me just, you know, again, show off these pips. The 4 and the 7 just have one big sword in the center and you just go off the number, and they are numbered so that you wouldn't necessarily, like there's not really a reversed. You'd have to remember that the sword, this is the upright sword. Same with the cups, right? 1 cup versus 4 cups, 2 cups, 10 cups, it doesn't matter. There's just one in the center. The wands look like this, and the coins are like this. Let me see if I can find you a few more of the quartz and the majors. I had not seen this deck, just sort of, you know, around. I saw it on eBay and sort of couldn't stand not owning it. So I grabbed it. And as I said, now I really have a taste for vintage decks. So I've been keeping my eye out for other ones, and I've managed to collect a couple. But this is the one, I'm just so happy with this. I didn't know it existed until I saw it on the eBay listing, and I'm really taken with it. I do a lot of readings for myself where I only use quartz, or I use the quartz and the majors, and I have considered sort of separating the pips, but I'm getting used to them. There's just not much information in the pips, and so I've considered taking them up, you know, separating it out and just using the majors and the quartz, because they are so wonderful. Oh, this when I saw this hermit, this is when I knew I had to have this deck. I was already really into it, but when I saw that hermit, I was a goner. And oh, I think maybe just one more and we're done. And again, this is the Tarot Maddonni. And this, the box, you know, it's from 1981, so this box is in sort of rough shape, so I do keep it in a cloth. This is another deck from 1981. This is the Rolla Nordic Tarot. My understanding is it was originally published in the 1960s, but this is not a 60s version. This is an 80s version. Here's the backs. Tiny little deck, small size. And My understanding is that this deck was designed and sold for you to color it in yourself. So this one has no coloring. Nobody has ever filled it in. And in fact, when I got it, it was like separated in two, and half of it still had the cellophane collar around it. So as far as I can tell, I was the first person to read with it, which felt very special. The pips are just pips, as you can see, and I probably should look to see if they follow any sort of, historical system, but I have not looked into that yet. The pentacles, I think, are delightful because they all have a different design. When I saw that, I felt like that was really, I had to have it when I saw that. But I really like the illustrations on the majors and the quartz as well. This is a beautifully illustrated deck. I have no intention to color it in. I like it black and white. The cardstock is not awesome. The back is just very, I don't know, it feels a little odd, but it does shuffle well. I have read with it. It's lovely to read with. I plan to continue reading with it. I don't plan to treat my vintage decks like they're super precious. I want them to be used as tarot decks. That's what they were meant for, and I intend to use them that way, but I am just going to be careful with them. I think I will limit the riffle shuffling and just be very, very gentle with how I overhand shuffle them. You probably recognize a lot of these drawings, but like, look at this queen. Isn't she beautiful? I think it's really gorgeous art, really fun to read with. It feels very special to have such an old deck, especially one that had never been read with. Knowing I'm the first person to have read with it feels really incredibly special. That is the Rolla Nordic. Another vintage tarot in my collection where I was the first person to read with it is my tarot Balbi. This was originally published in 1976. This is the 1978 printing of the deck. Here's the backs. And I know I was the first person to read with it because the cards were still in the cellophane since 1978. It felt so special to do that first reading with this deck. This is a well-known deck. There are, versions online. There's also a 1990s printing. This is the 78. I know it's the 78 because of the guidebooks and because it was printed in Spain. The 1990s version was printed in Argentina. This is a Picard deck. So the way the pips are arranged and my understanding, this is pretty new to me, but like this sort of horizon on there indicates that it is Picard. And there's a swap with the suits and their elements. So this is water. And I think it has to do with the way Picard assigned, astrological associations with it. So swords are water and cups are air. I'm sure someday I will look into the Picard system, but the way I handle this is I buy a deck if I like the art. And I know what the Seven of Swords means to me, and I read it that way. Is it blasphemy? Is it heresy? I don't know. I don't care, because nobody's going to show up at my door and tell me I can't do that. So I read this as the Four of Pentacles. I know what that means to me, no matter what deck I'm reading with, and it allows me to read with a wide variety. Now, of course, I will, respect other people's opinions that that's like not how it should be done, but I'm happy enough reading that way. I love this deck. I wanted a deck from the 1970s. This is a deck from Spain. I did a study abroad in Spain, and that country means a lot to me. I was a Spanish teacher for many years, and so I really felt an attachment to this deck, and I put off buying it for a couple of years, actually. But when I saw this one from 1978, that was still, the cards in the cellophane, I jumped at it. I felt like the time was right, and I'd already bought, another vintage deck, so I was into vintage. I worry about the scent of vintage decks, I'm going to be honest, and that's why I felt like, since it was still in the cellophane, that it was a good risk to take. Anyway, this is the Tarot Balbi. It's I think a well-known deck. I'm really happy to have it. I love it. I love the shape of it. I love the colors. I like the very weird art. Great deck. This is the Vintage Aquarian. I had heard so much about this deck, like the vintage versions of them, that I found this at Half Price Books for a very good price and decided to go for it. This is a 1980s printing, I believe probably mid-80s, based on a couple factors, both the style of the box, where the title is, and then also the instruction book I have based on the book that's being advertised in the back. This is a beautiful deck and is still in print, but it's, you know, slightly different, the modern version. I also have the modern version, and that's why I wanted to get this older one too. But the colors are really beautiful. The size of the deck is pretty cool. It's more square. And I think you've probably seen this art. The one I got is in great shape. It's clearly been used before. The cards are warped a little bit, you see. I think this is just from being old. I don't know if this would, you know, if this was shuffled this way, it would have been shuffled like that. So I don't think it's from shuffling. I think it's just an older deck. And I don't mind that very much, to be honest. I love old things. I have a vintage teacup collection. I have a few vintage fountain pens. I love vintage. I love antique. I always have. I'm sitting at an antique desk right now that I got from my grandma. She was a big collector. And so it's no surprise that I would eventually get into vintage decks as well, because I'm just drawn to older things. So this is a deck you've probably seen before, the modern version of it. I think the colors are a little bit more saturated in the vintage, which is why I was really interested in it. Also the shape of the cards, I was really drawn to that. And I felt like since I could see the cards in person instead of buying it online, it was time to go ahead and finally get my vintage Aquarian Tarot. Again, that is the Aquarian Tarot. And that's it, my entire vintage tarot deck collection. I'm also doing my modern mass market and indie tarot, also indie mass market oracle, my Lenormand, my playing cards. So please stop back, check out those other videos, subscribe. It really helps the channel if you subscribe, like the video if you liked it, and let me know down in the comments, do you have vintage decks? Have you been looking at them? What do you think of these? Are there any you think I would love? I'd love to chat about it. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!